Hey, and good morning, and welcome to episode 61 of Talking to Artists. So, Talking to Artists is a casual conversation with artists, gallery owners, collectors, just to kind of get a better insight on the behind-the-scenes world of creating and being an artist. So, very excited today to talk to Steve Fretwell. So, he actually is a consultant. He helps businesses turn their business around, become more profitable, increase revenue. And during COVID, he decided that he was going to, for some reason, become an artist. So I'm very excited to hear his story. He's now actually selling his work, promoting it, and it's a very interesting kind of move from something that was kind of very different. Apparently, he was never particularly successful in art. We'll see how true that truly was. And now he's making a career of it. So that's pretty amazing. So we'll just wait for him to join us. In the meantime, just wanted to thank the people that came out to the Stouffville show. It was so great to see people in real life, and the weather held off, so that was really exciting. And right now we're kind of just in that kind of time where people are enjoying their summer, being at the cottage, and I guess the shows will primarily start end of August and into September. So I see that looks like Steve has joined us, so I'm going to invite him right on, and we will. I hope. This is where you never know. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Taylor.
How's it going?
Good. Can you hear me fine?
I can, yeah. It was a bit glitchy right at the very second, so I think we're good now.
Okay.
So I was just giving a very short introduction, because I always like the artists to talk about themselves, about the fact that you really just picked up a paintbrush for the first time in, June of 2019 during COVID, and now you're living the life of a carefree artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, there may be a little bit color to it than that, but yeah, that is the truth. And of course, I'm so delighted to have the chance to be on this platform with you. I've snuck in occasionally over the course of the last few weeks and months since we first were introduced. I think it was Debbie who introduced us, and been finding it all fascinating to hear what others are doing. But it, and in fact, a little bit like just completely overwhelming. This whole, I'm drinking a fire hose sometimes because there is so much, so much to learn,
Yeah. Well, and I think there isn't anything. So one of the things I'd like to, of course, hear your story and hear how your interest in military history kind of transformed itself into your art. But also, your kind of real job or your day job is as a consultant to help organizations and companies become more profitable and increase their revenue. So I would also just love to hear how you're applying that to your art practice, because I think you're in one of those unusual situations where you've sort of had that business brain and now, hopefully the art brain.
Yeah.
I'm sort of losing your vocal a little bit, your voice.
Hold on, let me just adjust my machine, my little fancy phone here to set it up so it might be a little better for us.
Okay.
Let me just see. I know what I need to do. I think I'm blocking the microphone portion of it. Putting it on trying to follow those instructions to make sure that your camera's in the right place, and you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing. Is that a little bit better? Let's see here. Is that a little bit better?
Sounds like it is.
Probably should be a little bit better.
Are you okay? You're not getting feedback from me, right?
I am not getting feedback from you.
Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, so you tell me how all of a sudden, in the middle of COVID, where I know a lot of people went through a lot of kind of emotional anxiety and stress, how come you decided that you were going to pick up the paintbrush?
That's an interesting question, and the short answer to it, before I give you the long answer to it, is I'm not really sure how that came to be. I think with the passage of time, I'll have a better understanding of it, but it was more of a stumbling into than a getting up one morning and saying, here's what I'm going to do, and laying out a strategy and deciding on all the tactics. Like in my day job, where to get things done, you have to do a whole bunch of things, get a lot of people in between what you want to do and the outcome. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't by design. I could
Well, and I wonder if, so, oh, sorry to interrupt. I just think it was very interesting to me as an artist when COVID hit, how many people actually took real solace in creating. Like you were starting to see on a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of people picking up a
yeah.
paintbrush or picking up a musical instrument or drawing or something. And I think it does feed a part of the soul that artists have always known, but it hasn't always been fully recognized, I think, by more of a corporate kind of entity.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I found out that there was demand for painting when I couldn't get supplies. I don't know what your world. Like, try to go and buy
yeah.
titanium white.
Oh,
It's
it's
like,
brutal. It's still
where did it
brutal.
all go? Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I know I'm not alone. And then there's more evidence of not being alone for taking up painting or whatever the other items that you had said, because as I started to post that I was doing this on my professional profile on LinkedIn, I was quite surprised and pleased by the number of professional non-artist people who said, "Oh, by the way, Steve, I've been painting, photographing, sculpting. I've been doing all this stuff, but I've hid it." Right?
Hmm.
And they were quite curious. Some of them still are, about how do you actually bring that, digitize that, and bring it to life and apply the things that they know from their professional lives to something like this. So that's been kind of interesting. But I think going back to your original question about how did this come to be, um, it's probably best to talk to you about and share what I was up against, because
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
because full transparency, I am technically colorblind. Now, for anybody,
Oh,
yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah, and I failed the grade.
But I think we were talking about this before because I'm always amazed at. I have a number of people who are colorblind that buy my art, and my art's all about
Yeah,
color.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
find that
yours
such an
is. Yeah, yeah,
interesting.
exactly. Well, I love it.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Well, thank you.
yeah. So I failed the color wheel in grade 8. And I was reminded when I
Right.
said this to a friend of a friend, that Mr. Carson, who was the grade 8 art teacher, probably hit me in the back of the head with a clog or something. That because he was back in those eras where they,
Because you could
yeah,
do it
because they could
then.
do it then. But what they couldn't do then that they can do now is they couldn't give me a test. Like when you fail the color wheel really
Right.
badly, it's not because you're not paying attention. It's because, the balance of cells in the back
You're
of
not
your
seeing the
eyes
colors.
and all that kind of thing. So call it an epic stymieing thing. I just completely stopped. Like I didn't do anything, zero. I turned my attention to
Yeah.
sport and academics and chasing girls and drinking beer and just, trying to stay out of big trouble. I never managed to get into big trouble. But with the passage of time, and a long time, I found in my professional life I had tremendous appreciation for the people in the marketing department, and as graphics became more of a function of an organization internally, they didn't have to go outside to do it.
Hmm.
Laying out documentation and trying to explain through art and copy what it is that the insurance industry does is not an easy task. I mean, it's not glamorous like, cars or buildings or really cool stuff. I mean, it's insurance. It's like, ugh. But I had a great appreciation.
Well, I know because I don't know if you know, but I had my company that I ran, the marketing company, specialized in business to business financial services and
Oh, well,
technology.
there you go. Yeah, so
So
you were one of them.
So I totally get
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and you have to make it exciting, and it certainly can be, but it's you have to create those stories, and it's a completely different
Yeah, it's a
language.
pretty regimented kind of world. So I would have been the sales business
Hmm.
development guy looking over your shoulder saying, that's really cool. Could we do this or could we do that? So I had an orientation towards it, but the notion of being a creator just never occurred to me. Right. So I go from, grade 8 to January 1st of 2019. I bought some work. I was really lucky. I managed to meet sort of quirky, unusual Canadian artist, a guy named Michael Adamson, who I bought some work
Hmm.
from. Michael's not like other people. He's quite interesting. And I got to go into his studio and
Most artists
yeah,
aren't.
yeah, yeah, Michael's not like other people, at least not the ones that I know. And his studio was just an explosion of creativity. And he managed to rent or get his hands on a auto body shop and converted it to a
Hmm.
studio. So there's lots of height, There's lots of light. There's lots of places to store stuff. Paint was being used in there all the time anyway. So it was really this place. I remember the first time someone had said, "Oh, if you like the work, I'll introduce you to the guy." So I went over to his place and I saw this, like, just world of a madman with massive scale paintings all over the place and stuff on the floor. And I thought, this is just the greatest thing. It was not as organized as your office would have been when you were in financial services.
Right, you didn't really see my office, so probably was.
Yeah, it wasn't like the one that I knew, with the stuff like that. So I
No, I always had the crazy office.
yeah. So I after I met Michael, I bought, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 different paintings from him, and one of them I put up directly in front of me, maybe 7 or 8 meters away, up on a wall. It was a small abstract of a guy in a military parade. And I knew the backstory of it because he told me the story about being in London and doing sketches and just coming up with these ideas. And Michael works very quickly, and he created this stuff. I remember looking at it for years and years and years, which is what led to Canada Day of 2019, where I had mowed the lawn, chopped down the trees, did all the stuff. And my stepdaughter was just getting into the Ontario College of Art. So she had an easel and some paint. So it occurred to me, oh, I got nothing to do. Might as well take the easel, go sit out, listen to the French cafe music, right? And because of my interest in military history, I listened to like Charles Trenet and all these traditional French bon vivant kind of singers, right? So I put that on, I get some wine, and I get a little easel set up, and I'm like, okay.
Did you wear a
No, I
beret?
don't.
I feel like you have to have a beret.
Yeah. But it was kind of like, okay. It was like 2 hours of getting ready, and then I look at the horizon, and I try to do a landscape, a traditional, this kind of landscape on a piece of canvas that was this big, and I failed miserably at it. I thought it was just awful. And the next day I got up and I thought, that thing that Michael did that I bought that's up on the wall, I'll just try and copy it. How hard can it be? Well, when you've got no...
Pretty hard, I'm thinking.
You've got okay, so I've got no training. I have color problems. I don't have the right tools. I don't know, and I got zero. There's nothing in between me and my total lack of ability and the canvas. There's no coaching, there's no guidance, there's no judging, there's no nothing. So I tried to copy it and failed miserably. And then on July the 3rd, I thought, well, I'm not good enough to do anybody else's stuff, so I might as well try and do my own thing. And I had in the house was a 30 by 40 centimeter canvas on board. I say 30 by 40 centimeters because it's not North American sizing. Had I known not to do that, I would not have begun to paint on this stuff, because I wanted to, when I began along this journey of the same subject matter in the same size, I didn't want to switch sizes or anything. I realized you can't buy frames. Like off the shelf at that size just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, so I was interested, like, a lot of people, both men and women of a certain generation. I think I was fascinated by military history. I'd read all the books, I'd seen all the movies. It was all kind of interesting to me. And for full transparency, since I had no training, I didn't know how to paint hair. I was afraid of painting hair. So when I was doing portraits, I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do a portrait of? Okay, I like military history because I like the uniforms and everything that's on a uniform is on there for a reason.
It's symbolic.
Yeah, it's not just, oh, hey, let's put this badge on this guy, right? And they all wear hats. So I thought, well, I don't have to do much of the hairs, and the hats are all for a reason. So I painted my first military portrait in that scale. And then I just kept on getting up in the morning and going, well, if I keep on doing this, I'm bound to get better. And in my professional life, and I was quite active in sport, repetition was my friend. I just try again and again and again. So the first 4 or 5 portraits of a quality perspective, but 5 to 10, it started to really take off because I started figuring things out. I'm going, oh, okay, the eyes have got to go here, and there's this, and I went to the internet and learned a few things here and there. And then it occurred to me that I liked the subject matter. The other phenomena that happened in the world is access to detailed records of any subject that had traditionally been just in book format were all coming online. So in military history, you can get really granular with who made the uniforms, who designed them, what the actual colors are, the battles, the timing, anything that was written down. Thank God the military, they like writing stuff down and keeping records of things. So you could get super, super granular if you were willing to go to Google's page 8 or 9. You just needed to figure out where to work. The Canadian Military Museum was handy. The Imperial War Museum was really, really good.
That's an amazing museum.
Yeah, you could get some really, really cool information. And then I think maybe it was the 8th or 9th painting that I did. I wanted to do someone in the RAF because I had watched the Battle of Britain 27 times. I was like, oh, okay, let me try some RAF guy with a jacket and, the ear things and the goggles and the whole thing, right? So I was halfway through that painting and I had been posting on Instagram. I created a new page and I started posting my paintings on Instagram, but I had, 3 followers or something. My daughter and one of her friends felt sorry for me.
Oh, we all start that way.
yeah, exactly. And so I played university football, and suffice to say, when my football playing friends stumbled upon my Instagram account with my painting, the adjectives that came out of their mouths about what I was doing were very colorful. Like, what? And there was a lot of locker room talk because doing this was completely unexpected. Right? It's like, I don't know, it's like Mike Tyson publishing a poetry book. You just don't expect it, right? You just go like, how did this happen? How did this come to be?
Which is unfortunate too, that you kind of realize how quickly you get kind of siphoned off into these little channels of, or stereotypes of what's accepted, what's not within certain people. There's no reason why Mike Tyson shouldn't be writing poetry. I don't know if he does or not, but I do know that Sylvester Stallone has got a huge, incredible abstract art collection, which also people don't necessarily connect, right?
I didn't know that part. So I was toiling away kind of on my own, and then there's, I think what I've learned is that the lens through which I look at life, we all look at life, whether we're involved in art or whatever enterprise we're involved in or doing things, it's all impacted by our experience. And for full transparency, at that particular point in my life, all of the categories in my life, things weren't going well for me, whether professionally, in my relationship. It just wasn't. I was not in a good place. Couple that with COVID, the drive to create more in a COVID environment. It was good for me because I wasn't interfered with. I couldn't go to Sheridan College and take a class if I wanted to, because there weren't any available. People couldn't come and see my work. I couldn't join my friend Will, who I made pals with once in person before COVID, who I followed online. He's a painter. I couldn't go over and paint with him anyway. So I was forced.
Which is actually kind of a really interesting. I mean, a lot of artists paint because they have to paint, and I think that is definitely kind of exercising some of those emotions and thoughts. And when things are not going well, you kind of put it out on canvas. But it's an unusual opportunity, really, to be able to sort of have all that time and isolation to find your own voice so quickly. Like, it seems to me that you found your own voice relatively quickly, considering you haven't been painting for that long. And I'm sure those are part of the factors that kind of came into play.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I often say in my when I on my website and then on any of the documentation or anytime I talk, COVID gave me the opportunity to try something new. The motivation to
Mhm.
try something new is much more of a personal thing, and it's important and relevant. But when I started to post my content, oh, I'll get back to the story about this guy. Yeah, with the colorful adjectives when he called me on the phone. He's like, "What?
Yeah.
The RAF guy? What? Did you get hit in the head?" Like, no, man. So, so it's the combination of having the time to do it, being sufficiently motivated, and then having the medium through which to share it with the world. And that's what technology gave me.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
it was those things. I was quite surprised as I went along in my journey, Kate, about how many artists have not yet either A, shared their stuff with the world at all, number one. Number two, haven't taken advantage of the technology and the mechanisms through which they can share it with the world. For some reason, they just kind of
Hmm.
haven't gotten around to doing it. I think it's a massively
I think I
underserved market.
no, I think it's a massively underserved market, but I do think that some of the motivation for a lot of artists is because it is almost like a therapy for them. And so it's not about getting it out there always. It's not about getting selling it always. It's about kind of the need to do and drive to do it. I mean, I agree with you, and I think that COVID in a lot of ways has pushed a lot of artists to become more digital and become more online and start to think about selling online, which really had not happened really to the majority of artists even 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. You must have seen it. I mean, I know you were trying to talk to me, but I'm quite interested in talking to you about how does Kate Taylor go from doing whatever you're doing to all of a sudden you're the queen of interviewing artists. It didn't happen. You didn't get up on Monday morning and go, "Hey, I'm going to do this on Tuesday," and suddenly, you were the.
Well, actually, it was kind of like
It was, oh,
that.
hey.
No, no, well, no, but for me too, it's something that had been in the back of my mind for a while. I wanted to do, I wanted to interview artists, and I thought it'd be cool to do a podcast. But COVID for me also provided that impetus because I was lonely. I missed people. I missed talking to people. I missed understanding what makes them tick, and so it seemed that there was a good way to start. And I never thought I would be at 61 episodes, which
Is
I
that
am
where you
now. You're
really?
61.
Wow.
Yeah. I figured I'll do it for a couple of months and then I'll run out of friends who want to talk to me, you know. Um, but it's been
Well,
really
I
great.
have
It's taken
some.
on a bit of a life of its
Yeah,
own
I
now.
have some other like-minded fellows who might be interested in going on your roster, so you can start to book yourself in advance. But let me
Sure.
take you back to that. I think it was painting number 8 or something, and this RAF and this guy who called me, and he's a senior executive at a big company, a little rough around the edges, and he started giving me the gears about painting because it was unexpected, right? So he starts giving me the gears,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Well, listen, is there anybody in your family who ever served their country during World War One or two?" And he said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, his wife's father, grandfather, father-in-law, I guess, who made it to 91 or 92, served in the RAF and was shot down over Europe and didn't talk about it much." So I
Mm.
knew where to go to get all that information. He didn't. So I said, "Listen, man, give me a name, and I said, if you got a date of birth, that'd be helpful, and let me get on it." At that point in the painting, the guy doesn't have a face. Like, I got the bomber
Right.
jacket and the hat on, and I know he's going to be an RAF guy with the blue uniform and that kind of stuff. So I went to Google page 9 or 10 or whatever, and I figured out the whole story. And this is a testament to digitization and historical advancement of and sharing of information. So what it told me was what his squadron was, where he took off, what time he took off, what plane he was in, where he was shot down, who shot him down, which prisoner of war camp he was in, and what his POW number was. The
Wow.
family knew nothing about this. So I got all this information, and I stumbled across a photograph of, these dashing looking airmen from 1941 or something. And there's like 15 guys in the picture, but there's only 10 names. So I can't tell who's who. And if you remember your World War II movies, a lot of these guys had these little Clark Gable mustaches. So when I was painting the face, the biggest decision was whether his eyes are blue or green, or the shape of his jaw, or because
you do the mustache.
do I put a Clark Gable mustache on this dude or not, right? And I just went, okay, you know what? I'm going to put a Clark Gable pencil mustache on the guy. So I did it, and then I posted the thing, and I sent it to him along with the story. And if you follow my Instagram or my webpage, is I tie in all of my work with some sort of backstory. Right? Mm-hmm. I'd say 90% of them are totally true, where I get them from historical records to sort of have a point of reference about what I'm doing. And a couple of them I totally made up, just for fun. Total fictional character named so-and-so was in the battle of blah, 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 and that kind of stuff. So I sent it to him, and he came back to me just completely flabbergasted. He couldn't believe that they didn't know this stuff. And he was the first person who said, I want to buy it. And I had no idea how much to charge. I was like, I know it's more than $1 and less than $1 million, but other than that, I've got no clue, right? So I'm trying to calculate it in my head like a businessman going, and didn't really know. So I pulled a number out of the hat, and he thought that was fine. And it now adorns the wall of the airman's grandson in his apartment in Boston. Cool. And what his grandson found that Dad didn't know that he had was a picture of him from that period. And indeed, he has a Clark Gable pencil mustache. So if you go on my Instagram page, you can see this guy, Mike, who goes, Steve, I just got your painting. It's so bleeping cool. And so to get that kind of reaction from someone when you can tie their family and their background into it was motivation to say, you know what? I should probably keep on doing this.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you move from portraiture then to the work right now is very abstract? Like I don't see any representational imagery at all on your website.
Yeah. So that sequence was, well, let me go back just for a second. So I was probably around 21 or 22 military portraits. And in my head, I should do this 50 times. I just pulled that number out of my head early on. And I was starting to slow down and going, I don't really feel like I'm getting any better here. So I got in touch with Michael Adamson and this buddy of mine, Will, who sort of my art coach friend guy, and asked them both, should I go and take a course? I was assuming COVID was going to be over and I could actually go and learn how to do something. And both of them said, no way. Said, no, if you think you got enough sauce in you to get to 50, just keep going because you're developing a quirky style. And I said, I thought it was bad. A bad style because I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, no.
Hey, it's all about marketing. You know that.
Yeah. Quirky and odd. So I recommitted to do, to get to 50 of like just hammer away at this particular thing. And I think along the course of the 50, I probably threw away 2. Where I was just so, I was like, this is just so awful. I can't add it. And the move to something else was as I got closer to 50, more people started to see them on my Instagram page and like them and wanted to buy them. And there was a guy around the corner from me who ran a art gallery. He's a framing guy, and he was so enthusiastic. So because I had a weird size, I couldn't buy normal frames. So I went to see John Chen, JC Art and Framing on, Dundas Street West. And he's like, this is amazing stuff. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm like, okay. So he said, have you photographed all your stuff? And it had occurred to me that I need to have some central place to store, like to have a library or a record of all of my work and to store it in a non-digital format. Mm-hmm. And so somebody said to me, you should make a book. I thought, okay. So I thought Apple Book, right? Like just go on the internet, upload your pictures.
Yeah, nice and easy
thing. And then one of my big thinking buddies And so what's happening at the time is my natural market, my financial services market through LinkedIn, and my market through Instagram, and my all of the different people in my life are starting to follow me. So I don't have 3 followers anymore. My follower number is getting bigger, and I posted on my LinkedIn page because I was between jobs. I posted that I was painting. And the positive feedback that I received from people against the backdrop of COVID was just really motivating. People said what you said at the beginning. It's good for your mental health. It's good to try something new. People can't get out. They can't do these other things. So it kind of spurred me on. And then somebody said, don't make an Apple book. Make a coffee table book that weighs like 1.8 kilos. This is one of the, one of those people that you have in your life, Kate. Kate, you need to be at the Modern Museum of Art, and you
be big.
You get the Sky Dome, and So I didn't know where to start. So I got in touch with an old football buddy of mine who's been in the publishing. He manufactures books and magazines, and I said, Barry, like, I'm thinking about this book, and he's like, you're doing what? I'm like, I'm painting. What? Yeah, like with a paintbrush. You mean your kitchen? I'm like, no, it's not my kitchen. It's like paint. So he referred me to a guy named Peter Handley. Peter Handley is a book editor. He lives in Ottawa, and he specializes in architecture books and military history books. He photographs aircraft.
Oh, perfect.
So he talked, and I listened, and I sent him my stuff thinking, oof, like 50 portraits in a book, how's it going to weigh? And he came back and he said, this is fantastic. Like, it's really cool, and you should do it. And I thought maybe I'd publish one of them or print one of them. And I was skeptical about what the output would look like. I'm thinking, and when I got up to maybe 41 or 42 paintings, he had introduced me to a thing, another military sort of history nerd thing called Vintage Wings of Canada, which is a privately held airplane museum in Gatineau, owned by the guy who made a fortune at Cognos. And he's got like a Spitfire and a Hurricane and a Lancaster, and it's all his own personal stuff. And Peter takes military photos of all of his planes. He says, if you like military photos and that RAF story is kind of cool, you should go to their website. So I went to their website, and I found a thing on roundels. So with most military application of art, color, and design in the military, 99.9% of the time it's designed to disguise. They purposely color and paint things and design things so they can't be seen, right? Particularly in the absence of radar. Let's leave the radar thing out of it. So all the uniform, other than the military dress uniforms, which are, hey, look at me. Okay, there was a whole history of roundels and how the French put a cockade on their hats, and I was interested in all that kind of stuff. So one day I started to paint roundels. So a roundel is that circle that you'd see on the side of the plane. It looks like a target. And I thought, oh, painting circles, I can do that. It's a lot easier than faces, right? Heads, eyes. Oh. So I started doing roundels, and from roundels I stumbled across. There's been a massive release of aerial reconnaissance photographs that were taken in World War II, and the Canadian Military History Museum is finding, as these men who are well into their 90s and stuff now, as their families are going through their personal belongings, there was a whole division of photographers in the RAF whose job it was to design and design the technology, process photographs in advance of military operations in invasion of Europe, or the liberation of Europe. Right. And out of these guys' dusty books are falling amazing pictures of not only the aerial reconnaissance, so it's like is like Google Earth. So instead of looking at a landscape like this, it's like this. Problem is, it's all in black and white, which was good for me because I'm like, oh, I can make it any color I want. Because
you can't see the color anyway.
The colors to me are different than the colors to you. So I did a lot of research on that and tied that in with roundels. So my work went from portraits. I finished the 50 portraits, and then I moved to roundels and the history of roundels, and I put like rivets onto canvas to make it look more like the side of a plane. And the roundel thing was interesting. And then from roundels, I started to move to abstract landscape. But my landscape work is always from the perspective of flying in the plane, like the stuff that the camera saw when it looked down.
Right.
And it was at that point that Instagram became not enough for me, because someone had seen an abstract landscape of search patterns that the Air Force used to try to track down U-boats. I did an abstract one of the North Atlantic on LinkedIn, and someone who I didn't know from outside my market sent me a note on LinkedIn, said, I want to buy your painting. I was like, it's 48 by 48. So yeah, so I was like, I didn't know what to do, right? I was like, oh, how much does it cost? How much do I like? Okay.
You're an entrepreneur. I'm sure you figured it out, though.
But perhaps most importantly, and this is perhaps one of the tips, is I didn't try to figure it out on my own. I thought there's got to be somebody who knows how to price this stuff into the market. So just the way I went to find somebody to help me with the book, and I found someone, and the book started to take shape. I got in touch with a guy, and I said, listen, so is there anybody who can help me through this? Is there a coach? So he introduced me to a woman who helps artists stand up their websites. She works in Belleville, and so I had to pay to talk to her. So I talked, and she listened, and she said, I think you've got something interesting here, but you need a web page. And then she sent, and then she sent me a pricing grid, an Excel sheet. Right. I work with actuaries and math people all the time, so I'm like, oh, great, an Excel sheet. Formulas.
Something I recognize.
Yeah. And so I then had a way to price the work. And I went back to the guy and said, it's this much. And he said, that's okay. Our house is getting built. I'll come back to you. But by that time, the need to, now I had to photograph all my work properly. I saw one of your posts on how to do that. So I get in touch with someone who's a photographer and had them photograph my work under the right light and learn how to take it outside and photograph it and get it straight, that I don't always get. And again, I had lots of time on my hands, so I started a series about the D-Day invasion, and I named them after the code names of the beaches. So Sword, Gold, Juneau, Omaha, and Utah Beach. And my style of, I called the series From Above. It's this whole notion of, what did you see there? And I found it interesting that against the backdrop of horrific things that happened on the ground, when you're flying above them, right, there's this whole weirdness about the world that way. And as the liberation of Europe occurred further and further, the point of view of people in the planes and the photographs that they're taking became really tragic. Like cities completely burnt out. And I thought, do I want to paint a burnt out city? Like the body of work on D-Day is called The Day Before D-Day. So when you look at it, you don't see any evidence of an Allied invasion. Like there's no bomb marks or any of that kind of stuff, right? And then in the course of that work, I stumbled across some photographs of Keukenhof Gardens, aerial shot.
In Amsterdam.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And then I was raised in Ottawa, so I was familiar. My mother would take me every year, and I have to walk around with her and look at all the tulips. And I was like, I didn't care about any of this stuff. But there's a very deep relationship between the Netherlands and Canada, and the princess being built, and the tulips and all that kind of stuff. So I had some familiarity with it, but I had not seen it from that perspective. Like landscape work of tulips and flowers is very traditional.
Right.
Oh, yeah, there's...
But the fields, yeah, it is abstract. It does certainly come across as an abstract
Yeah,
vision.
and the other thing
Yeah.
that I noticed too about doing research on the geometry of it, you know, the Flemish farmers and everybody over there, they don't have it's not like Canada where they farm just, they waste no land. Like everything is very, right, which was easy geometry for me to put into place. So I started to apply my work to Keukenhof Gardens, but in the context that if I was a pilot, some kid from Peterborough, and I was flying and I could fly over, I say Peterborough because a lot of RAF pilots came from Eastern Ontario because they trained a lot here. If I was flying over Europe, over bombed out buildings and bombed out cities and just all of this stuff, if I could fly over Keukenhof Gardens in the spring when those flowers were in bloom, I'd do it in a second. I wouldn't care if I got in trouble from my boss, right? Like I'd be like, no, there's no way. Because it just pops in an unbelievable way. And the colors are so vibrant and so rich. And it's just, it would be unmissable to me.
Well, and certainly, I mean, of your collections, that's the one I like the best because it's got that color, and I don't know, it's got brighter colors, which I always love.
Yeah, because I can see the other thing. And the other thing that I learned too, and this is in sort of watching you and other artists and following them, is you get on a note and you stick with it, right? Whether it's this big or it's 48 by 48 or it's bigger, I really had to say, don't leave this yet. There's more to discover, and there's different color combinations. And of course, I would go into the art supply store and try to explain my situation, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're the guy who doesn't know color. Well, let me give you." So I just kind of did what I was told to, as far as
but it does take a while. I think for me it takes years, and it changes. Like I like a lot of people look at my work and say, "Oh, you're doing the same thing as you've been doing for the last 5 years." But to me, the work I'm doing now is more sophisticated and more intentional than the stuff I was doing 5 years ago. For me, it changes. Like I think it changes because I think you continue to refine it.
Yeah. So I don't know that I'm done with Keukenhof yet, and I did other places because some of the photography, the good black and white stuff that's coming out of Europe was taken at dawn. So even though it's black and white, you get a sense, and whether it's taken in the winter. And there's a fascinating story around just prior to the Canadian liberation of Holland, where the people of Holland were being starved, and the Air Force came in and dropped food in to save them. And Keukenhof Gardens actually didn't exist in the way we understand it now until after the war, when all the growers got together and said, like, we almost lost the crop here. We almost lost all these because people were eating the bulbs. I don't know if maybe a lot of people don't know that, but there's beautiful examples of tiles, ceramic tiles that adorned kitchens that were developed after World War II that have images of airplanes, RAF planes, dropping food into the countryside in Holland. So I thought that was a kind of a really cool thing. So,
well, I think anyone who's I know, because when we traveled through Holland as well, like as a Canadian, you absolutely see how that appreciation is still alive and well today. Like, and I know they provide sort of, I think 10,000 tulips or something a year to Ottawa, but I think they learn about how Canada helped liberate Holland, and they learn about the participation of the RF and Canadians that were over there, which is really kind of a wonderful thing. To have that deep relationship.
So I can tie that back to my mother walking through the tulips, or being Canadian, or looking down, and the rest of it. So I do like that kind of work. So what had happened.
So I don't mean to interrupt, but we only have about
Oh,
10 minutes left, believe it
I
or
was
not.
worried about not being
And
so nervous with you, Kate, that I wouldn't be able to talk. Apparently, I have verbal diarrhea. Just like,
no, and the story's fascinating, but I have to keep it within a certain period of time, otherwise I can't keep the interview. So I want to do that. But one of the things I just wanted to touch on a little bit, and this is really my more pulling on how you've used your business background to really help your art background, is your use of LinkedIn. So has that been kind of your primary kind of environment for capturing new audiences or sharing your work, or how are you using LinkedIn?
Yeah, so what I had over 1,000 people on LinkedIn who followed me professionally. And when I first started during COVID to post stuff that I was doing, the response was what motivated me to keep going. Like people connected COVID and self-care and exploration and doing something new. So it encouraged me to keep going. There was that. And then when I found consulting work, I needed to move people away from my Steve Fretwell insurance guy LinkedIn to Steve Fretwell art. So I created a second LinkedIn profile and I made myself the CEO of Steve Fretwell Art, right? And in LinkedIn, they ask you for your education, and I said grade 8 art class. I failed the color wheel. Right? So LinkedIn allows me as the owner of Steve Fretwell Art to collect a following of people, and all that same rules you would have with hashtags and all the rest of that stuff. You can apply in LinkedIn, and when I make a video of my collection or some piece of art, or I take a picture of it, I always put it onto LinkedIn. LinkedIn redirects to my webpage. So for me, I haven't transacted a lot on my webpage, and it's so cool because you can see how many people hit your page and how long they spent on each page. It's like a data heads. Data people are like, wow, this is fantastic. But for me, my webpage is more of a validator. It allows people to go through and look at stuff. Because of the scale and the price point of my work, I've not sold a piece of work from the web page per se. What I've done is I managed to find a restaurant in Oakville and put a bunch of my stuff up on the walls. They got a lot of wall, and I have a lot of big paintings. And even though COVID was going on, people would walk through and go into the washroom and see a piece of work, take one of my little postcards. And I don't know if you remember the day when you sold your first painting to someone you didn't know.
I do. I know exactly who it was.
Like, what? What?
Yeah.
Sure. Most artists probably remember that point. And I remember that very much. What I also happened upon is a small group of interior decorators and designers in the Oakville area who are looking for something like what I'm doing, and they've made purchases of my work. It's interesting to have someone call you from a table, like looking inside a room, seeing a painting, say, "Hi, my name's so-and-so. I'm looking at painting such and such. I want to buy it." Right? So that's really a cool thing. But my view of it is, from a marketing perspective, is you have to stand up a web page. It's a must expectation.
Absolutely.
You have to use Instagram. You have to get onto LinkedIn. All these hashtags about art, modern art, impressionist art, but whatever it is that you're doing as an artist, there's a hashtag for it on LinkedIn, and it is a business. So don't be afraid that it's just for accountants or lawyers or, whatever business people, because it isn't. I was a little worried that someone with LinkedIn would call me and say, "You're not supposed to sell art on LinkedIn." But that hasn't happened. And for my people on my network who know me professionally, it's a way to reach them in a medium in which they're operating in a lot. Right? They may not go to the internet or art galleries online or anything like that, but so I can reach them. If I can get them off their wallets to buy things, that's a totally different story. But it's a have to have. Well, you know that. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, no, it's just interesting because I I was a bit like you in terms of there was a period of time where you've got a foot in both camps where I was an artist, I was committed to being an artist. I still was running my marketing firm. Of course, the clients for the marketing firm want to know that that's your primary interest and focus, and that's where your energy is spent. But on the other hand, you have the art, so you're trying to figure out how to navigate two quite separate careers. And now, of course, for a while I've been now full-time artist, which makes it a lot easier. But it just occurred to me that I have over 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I really don't use it anywhere near how I should. So you've inspired me to kind of focus on my LinkedIn.
For sure. I think, Kate,
I totally should.
Content isn't your issue, right? Like, you got tons of content, and then what you're doing and how you're helping artists and that kind of stuff, I think is really good for you. So, in a closing thought about this, when people, again, once my network of friends and once they stop with the adjectives like "wah," right? I try to explain to them that. Particularly the analogy goes to sport. When I was playing football, my job was to play football, not to judge how I played football. Like, I was the doer, and other people would be the coachers, and other people would be the critics and do those other kinds of things. So when I started painting, it occurred to me very early that I'm not the judge here. I produce the content. If people like it, and I get an emotional response from it, fantastic. So I know what my job is. The other part about it is during COVID, my Netflix viewing dropped down to next to zero. So if I go to a cocktail party and people say, "Did you watch such and such?" I was like, "I've got no idea what you're talking about," because I didn't watch any Netflix. And my golf game wasn't really great to begin with. So I kind of stopped playing golf. Not that you could anyway. But when I calculate the amount of time it takes me to paint a piece of work, it's equal to a couple of good movies at Netflix. And I think I'm much better ahead to have some material representation of how I spent 3.5 or 4 hours than to be able to have 3 interesting comments about episode number whatever or whatever, right? So it's just much more rewarding to me.
Oh yeah, well, I think it definitely feeds the soul in a very different way.
Yeah.
So are you kind of this? So this is we only have a minute left, so I just need to kind of finish up. And I do really appreciate all your stories. It's amazing.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to some, because I'm not kind of like most of the people who I've heard you interview, and they're much more.
Well, that's what these are about, though. This is just about talking to interesting people, right? But I always like to end up my interviews with, if money, time, and everything was no option, what would your big hairy ass goal be?
Oh, I want my own building. Remember I told you about the guy who I met who bought it? I want an abandoned auto body shop with like all the places to do art, my gym to work out in, and my video screens, and with the Battle of Britain playing in the background, and D-Day and all that kind of stuff, and a place for my like-minded friends to come and talk about the battle of this or something of that, and to be able to lock the door and walk away from it. A full-on studio, but at scale, right?
Yeah, that'd be pretty amazing.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Because I've seen you interview people who have big. There's a woman, I can't remember, she's north of Montreal or something. She has like a garage, like a big, almost like a barn.
Oh, Claire. Yeah, a lot of people have amazing studios.
Wow, place. So I want to have a guy version of Claire Desjardins space with a big beer fridge.
That sounds pretty good. Okay, well, you make sure I'm on your guest list.
And a wine fridge too. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, that's our time. Thank you so much.
I appreciate talking to you.
I really appreciate it too. Thanks so much. And bye-bye. Coming up next week, we've got Ramona Nordell, who does some quite unusual portraits, which is great, and James Patterson, the prayer machine, and he does kinetic sculptures. So join us next week at 11 o'clock, Talking to Artists. If you've missed any past episodes, don't forget you can always catch them on my Instagram at Kate Taylor Art, my Facebook page, or YouTube, youtube.com/Kate Taylor Art, and some of them are on podcasts. So thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next week.